Sir, my question is to the Minister for Education. Can the Minister update the House on what the Marshall Liberal government is doing to support schools and preschools through the COVID-19 pandemic?
Minister for Education.
Thank you, sir. It's a very important question, and I thank the member for Colton for raising this. There is, of course, a critical need to support our schools and preschools through the pandemic. The government has had a very clear policy throughout that our schools and preschools will be kept open in line with the health advice. Not all people have followed that health advice all the way through. I know that for some time at the end of last term, those opposite were calling for schools only to be open for essential workers and vulnerable children. They have always been a category we've needed, but we've actually said all children should be supported in line with the health advice, and we continue that. And we're pleased the opposition has returned to the advice from Dr Spurrier rather than the advice from Dr Close. Now, the attendance at our schools as of yesterday is up to 90.4%. 90.4% attendance, which is great news for all South Australian children, families and educators. 3% of our schools, 3% of our students are learning from home at this point, and 6.6% of our students reporting as absent yesterday. Now, our teachers, leaders and staff have done an amazing job, and I talked a bit about this yesterday. They will indeed have a welcome boost today to see salary back pay as a result of the government's offer in the EB rounds that has now been supported by 78% of our workforce. Earlier this year, has gone through the SAYET and is now, as of this week's pay, in people's bank accounts. And that will be absolutely earned, absolutely appropriate, and I think will be particularly welcomed by the 78% of our staff who supported the government's offer. Through programs, through COVID, there have been a range of programs that we have announced and a range of existing programs that indeed were already in place that have provided support to schools, families, teachers and students through COVID. In particular, I note that preschools will benefit from a $20,000 grant to all preschools in the public system in South Australia. It's in their accounts now, and they are working through the process of how they will do the maintenance work, the painting or the roofing or the tiling or the shade structures or whatever needs to be done at those preschools to support their work. The member for Colton in his area would be interested to know the Baden-Patterson Kindergarten, the Fulham Park Primary School Kindergarten, the Henley Community Kindergarten and the West Beach Kindergarten will all benefit from that work. Also, $25 million increase in the maintenance work for schools has been announced this year across South Australia. 25 of those projects are underway, or indeed a couple have even been completed. 12 are at tender, 48 at design and documentation and 76 in planning. That work will be very, very welcome for small businesses and tradies this year. And again, the member for Colton would be pleased to know that the Fulham Gardens Primary School, the Kidman Park Primary School and the West Beach Primary School are all benefiting from a range of projects that have been on the backlog for some time that we're now able to clear through the advancement of this money. This is a backlog, of course, that's existed for many years. It's been raised by the Auditor-General for many years, and this government has taken steps to address that backlog, providing work at this critical time. And it is, of course, on top of our $1.3 billion infrastructure program in our budget, which is a record amount of infrastructure school spending in our budget. The reason it's a record is because this government has announced hundreds of millions of dollars of new projects over and above those which those opposite had left in the budget. We have also announced the best internet rollout in Australia, which 89% of schools have been connected, going from the slowest to the fastest internet in the nation, and today that will hit 90%. When the Cummins Area School and the Barmera Primary School are connected, we've added preschools to that rollout over the next year, and it is showing its value, particularly at this difficult time through COVID, where it has been called on and it has achieved what we have sought through better support for our schools and our students in South Australia.
For leading that cacophony of noise, I'm going to ask the member for Playford to leave for half an hour under 137A. And the member for Morphett is warned.
Sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you. My question is a supplementary to the Minister for Education. What is the government doing to ensure that teachers and parents at the school gate and students are observing the social distancing rules?
Minister.
I thank the member for the question, and this is an important question. It's one that has been discussed between myself and Professor Spurrier on at least one occasion, and the Education Department continues to engage with our public health professionals. The challenge arises, of course, because one of the social distancing mechanisms that we are seeking to do at many of our schools is to reduce the number of adults that are presenting on the school grounds as a matter of course. And so for a number of weeks now, most, if not, I don't think all, but most of our schools, maybe all of our schools in South Australia, have had a standard process where adults have been requested to only present on the school grounds if there is a particular need for them to do so. Now, in some circumstances, that has been identified where you might have a young student in the lower years or a student with a disability, a student with some level of need. The parents are welcomed in certain schools, in many occasions, to go onto the school grounds to assist that child to get to the classroom. But the majority of parents in South Australia have been asked to wait at the school gates if they are coming to the school to do so, to collect their child or indeed drop off. Schools have been provided with advice to support their parent communities, and they are also exploring some other areas where there are particular areas of concern identified at the school level. Some schools are exploring whether indeed to stagger the end of school time or not. Now, there are schools where this is not a problem. There are schools where this is a problem, and our local education teams, the education directors and the various, whether they're secondary or primary leaders, are working with principals as appropriate on a case-by-case basis to meet the needs of individual schools. Where there are concerns, where there are still behaviours at pick-up or drop-off time that are not seeing the behaviours that we're seeking, then we're working with schools to support them in whether there needs to be a change of practice. This is not a universal application across the state because the circumstances in each school are different, but it's certainly one where there are a couple of schools that have had members of the community express concerns. They're understandable, and we will work with the AHPPC advice, the advice from our public health officers, to find ways to solve those challenges as and when they arise.